Hello everyone, welcome to FEM 2020. This is a series of conversations we have on various topics focusing on women health and well-being. So we have been trying to interact with different specialities. So a group of sociologists, psychologists and healthcare specialists and mental health care specialists had come together. But a very important area in health and well-being is art and music. So today's discussion is on energies from dance and how it impacts our health and well-being. And for this, I invite our panelists. Geeta Chadha, she works in the area of feminist science studies, where we look at science pure and applied as an institution and as a knowledge-making system that reproduces patriarchal regimes and cultures. Second, we have Sushmita Ghosh. So Sushmita Ghosh was born to parents who came from either side of undivided India. She was brought up in Delhi in an environment that strove to retain and nurture the rich cultural buzz of Bengal in newly independent India. Sushmita started training in Kathak at the age of 8, and after an honors graduation in physics, she decided to take to dance as a full-time study in Kathak Kendra, New Delhi, and later as a profession. She has trained with Sri Tirathram Azad, Srimati Reba Vidyarthi, and Sri Munna Shukla. She also had the opportunity to watch Srimati Rohini Bhate in Pune at work and has been deeply influenced by her thoughts and values about dance, education, and personal growth. Sushmita Ghosh leads Akriti Foundation, which is based in Gurgaon. Dance to her is a pathway to awareness, aesthetics, and evolution. Welcome, Sushmita Ghosh. It's an honor to have you here. So the next panelist which we have is Sanjukta Wagh. She's a performer, choreographer, educator and curator. Sanjukta Wagh has trained extensively under Rajshri Shirke in Kathak and Pandit Murli Manohar Shukla in Hindustani music. Her engagement with theatre honed by playwright director Chetan Datar and Navras Sadhana training with G. Venu, her year-long experience at the Trinity Levin School of Dance, London, her love of literature and deep unease with comfort zones have led to her interdisciplinary and exploratory mode of work. Sanjukta has been the curator for dance at the Kala Ghoda Festival in the year 2009, 2012 and 2013. She has been honored with several awards and scholarships, including the Vinod Doshi Award for significant work in performing arts, Aditya Birla Kala Kiran Puraskar, Sur Singar Samsad Singar Mani, and British Council's Charles Wallace Scholarship, among others. So welcome Sanjukta Wagh to the panel. I think we'll start with a brief introduction of why we have chosen this subject. So as an endocrinologist, my life has been studying about science and then implementing it in practice. But at some time, and in fact at most times, there was something which seemed deficient in this whole practice of science as an endocrinologist. So sometime few years back, as a guru of my daughter, I met Sushmita Ghosh, who was teaching Kathak, and I started learning Kathak, and through there started my journey of exploring my artistic side, if I may say so. It's not about learning to be perfect, but what I understood is that it opened up a different dimension in myself. It helped me explore that when you understand your own emotions, it's easier to understand someone else. And when we talk about empathy and compassion in medicine, I think art becomes a very important component of all that. So, so let's start this discussion by talking to our panelists on their journey with art, their journey with Kathak and other forms of dance. Sushmita ji, if we may start with you.
Thank you, Veena, for inviting me in this panel, along with so many interesting journeys by so many interesting people. And I really look forward to this discussion and see what comes out of it. As a Kathak performer, we improvise. So we are used to improvising and always ending up in a new place from what we had expected. As you had mentioned earlier, I started dance as a little girl of 8 years old, holding my mother's hand, walking to Gandhar Mahavidyalaya, which was the closest place. And I tell my students nowadays who come, who live about 5 minutes car rides away, that I used to walk 45 minutes each way to get to my dance class. And the journey started from there. Then I joined Kathak Kendra along with school and all the exams, the usual pressures of studies and dancing. Eventually, after my graduation in physics, I did say to my family, okay, this is enough. I really want to do dance full time because I wasn't able to give enough attention to the two subjects, physics and dance. So that's where a new journey started from. Immediately after my graduation from Kathak Kendra, I was invited by the London Centre of Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan, where I taught for about 12 years. For 12 years, I was in London and I worked with various organizations, with various artists of different genres before I came back and decided that I want to continue the rest of my journey in dance in India. But that over a decade in London, it opened my eyes to dance as a much wider worldview. So, looking at dance as a way of evolution, as a way of personal growth started from those years. And I bring it back with me as I am back in Gurgaon managing my little studio. Akriti Foundation is the name of the organization. And I'm very aware that most of the students who come here, and I also consider myself as a lifelong student, will probably not become performers. Some might, who knows. But I definitely see the Kathak training, the process of training, as a way of nurturing everyone, including myself, and educating us all. So the little steps every day. And the whole idea is that we keep growing, we keep learning. As I teach, I learn new things from my students. So this is where I am today, and very, very excited about all the new insights that comes to me and that will again emerge from this discussion today.
Yes, that was that was a good start to the whole discussion. I hope that this conversation brings along some new insights from each of us. Sanjita, can we have you in the discussion? We would like to hear your journey with dance and Kathak.
Hi. I actually come from a family of doctors. My grandmother was a gynecologist. So was my grandfather from my mother's side, and they started one of the first maternity homes in Mumbai, in North Mumbai, in Malad. And my mother's a doctor, most of my aunts are doctors, my family is full of doctors. And I knew one thing very young. I knew I did not want to be a doctor. But I began my Kathak journey with a twice a week class, like most students do, with my guru, Rajeshri Shirke. And incidentally, we were her first batch of senior students. And before I knew it, I don't think I even consciously chose dance. I almost think that dance chose me. And I was pulled into that world. I don't remember consciously thinking I want to become a dancer, but dance had just become an inextricable part of my life. And in I actually don't have a formal degree in dance, but I did my MA with literature. I went to Pune, in fact, to do a master's degree in Kathak. But for some reason that didn't work out. And I'm very glad, because my journey with literature actually offered me a whole new world of uh, theories and movements in art and so many different forms of literature, which kind of came together. So I did not see a difference between my literature journey and my music journey. I was also studying Hindustani music, and my theater journey, because my guru Rajeshri Shirke started collaborating with a theater director, dynamic theater director called Chetan Datar. So all of them came together to form a very interdisciplinary mode of work. Then at around 20, I found myself uncomfortable and being caught in a kind of sameness, so to speak. And that's what led me to Laban in London. It's very strange how Sushmita ji's journeys and mine also both have Mumbai and India and London as part of them. So my journey to London, I wanted to put my body in a completely uncomfortable space. I wanted to not do anything related to Kathak for a year, to really see what language my body wants to speak rather than the language that it's been indoctrinated in. So London was a year of unlearning, in which I was like terrified. Culturally, everything was different. I was in another setup, but that's where I discovered Kathak. And I discovered my own body and Kathak in my body. And suddenly the form seemed boundless. There seemed so many ways of approaching the form itself, and it started very, very different explorations in my body. And yeah, and so I've been using various knowledges that I've gathered over years of workshops with different people, contemporary dance, theater, Navarasa Sadhana with G. Venu, various interactions with scholars like Geeta Chadda, with several collaborators, musicians. I've been working a lot with live music and music that is not traditionally used in Kathak. So we have created a lot of original pieces. And yeah, it's still a journey. I'm still learning and fumbling about along the way. But it's also for me a way to enter the unknown, and enter the unknown with a sense of wonder rather than fear. I think that's what dance has helped me stride.
Yeah. So I maybe I'll put the question a little differently. I wanted to inquire about how dance can be important in our physical and mental well-being. But do you think it's little different in the way medicine looks at well-being and when we get into art, literature, and dance? So Sushmita ji, you want to explore this idea of dance and well-being? Hello, yeah. So maybe I'll ask Sushmita ji and Sanjukta the same question. How can we associate dance and well-being? I mean, how do you look at well-being as a concept? Maybe we see it differently. We see health as some parameters being okay, but probably it's much more than that. It's from your conversation, it seems like a completely different dimension, including a spiritual and mental dimension, because these cannot be probably separated.
Yeah, well-being for me begins with awareness within and around. And as part of my dance training, we were introduced to yoga very early on. So I'm very comfortable with the definition of holistic well-being, which is physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. And I would like to add the social element of well-being as well. And of course, I find my dance training offers me all of this in a nutshell. So as I use this body as an instrument, just as any other instrument, but the good thing about this instrument is that I can work through both inside and outside. Whereas if I have a drum kit or a sitar, I will be more comfortable looking after the sitar from the outside, whereas my body, because I live in it, it gives me the opportunity to work from inside as well outside. As I learn my practical dance classes, along with that, there is the theoretical aspect. The Natya Shastra teaches us about the anga, the major parts of the body, the pratyanga, the upanga, the minor and the major limbs. And through that, I discover, and I not discover, I perceive my joints, my muscles, the connections, and the aches and the pains as well, and the countless possibilities of using this body to create a visual poetry. In that process, I have to be comfortable with my body, with each and every joint, with each and every part of the body, and the training helps me become aware of my body. So my posture, the way I hold myself, and the way I view the entire surroundings, that comes from my dance training. Abhinay is a major part of our dance forms, and it guides me to the world of emotions, to be aware of my emotions and to channel them so that through them I can reach the others. The melody, the music, the rag, the poetry, they are all very essential pillars of this process of awakening my emotions. As a performer, I have to be very deep in touch with how I'm feeling, what I'm feeling, before I can help someone or inspire someone to figure out how they are feeling and how our feelings connect. Because as performers, we are here only to connect. The rhythm in dance, in Kathak, the rhythm is plays a very crucial part, and the dancer is free to improvise. The rhythm actually challenges my brain. The various possibilities in tal, in various jatis, how I'm dividing time right here and now, which means I have to hear and I have to perceive the passage of time, and I have to divide it into beats, into matras, into micro beats. So if I'm not aware of time, if I'm not super one with time, which I cannot touch, which I cannot see, but I can only be aware of it, and that makes me hyper in a state of huge concentration. So I really have to concentrate to deal with rhythm. And finally, the dancer's aim in classical dance is to evoke rasa. And interestingly enough, the rasa is not about me. It is about my spectators, the audience, who are part and parcel of the performance experience. So I have to touch something deep within their soul for me to be a successful performer. And what I touch cannot be on the surface. It has to be something very, very deep within each soul that is part of my performance experience. It is this connection between souls that can stop one, as they watch a great masterpiece of art. It can bring tears to an eye when they watch Gandhari lamenting on stage. They are not Gandhari, or they have not been to the Lily Pond by Monet. But something that I am doing connects with their memories of lament, of beauty, of nature, and there we connect. So I have to be connected to my spirit. That again is a perpetual riyaz. Who am I, where am I, and all those questions. And of course, as a performer, all this happens simultaneously. No, I cannot say, okay, today I am going to look after only the physical part and tomorrow I'll be into the emotional part. No, it has to happen simultaneously. And that's where my riyaz comes in. So I'm constantly connected. My body, my soul, my emotions, my intellectual abilities have to be in sync. And that again is training and perpetual riyaz. So that's the way I look at it.
Yes, I think that sums it quite well. And from what I did, so I think everyone during Kathak training, the beautiful thing is that at every stage there is a challenge, and it can be perpetually kept on increasing. If you master a stage and then you go to another stage, and the kind of mindful awareness, mindfulness is becoming so much part of therapies now. And I think dance is the most beautiful way of being really focused on that moment, because otherwise that moment just gets lost, as you explained. Sanjukta, your views on how dance and well-being are connected. How do you look at it?
I think Sushmita Di really beautifully put it in terms of how dance is such a composite art in itself, which focuses on the spiritual, emotional, physical, and mental. In fact, in the beginning, we had two questions: dance and physical well being, and dance and mental well being. I would like to talk a little bit about this whole binary of body and mind, in which our whole education system in some way is designed. So these are mathematics and these are physics. So they are like subjects of, they're mental subjects. And then sports and dance is a physical activity. And I think dance is one subject which in its very being breaks this binary, because it is at the same time mental deeply. You have to be understanding, you have to be historian, you have to be mathematician, you have to be musician, you have to be, you're grappling with so many things connected with the past, especially in classical dance. You're inhabiting a form which has been nurtured over centuries by so many. So there's some connect to a geographical root, which is, one is imaginary. And so that imagination of a dancer, to develop that holistic imagination where you're simultaneously riding a past connected to history, connected to math, connected to space. You're connected to Ganga and Yamuna, you're connected to these rivers, so geography. So all these things kind of get um, combined in the process of dancing. In fact, recently we had this creative writing workshop in which I asked my students and myself a way to describe Kathak in a metaphor. So I described Kathak is like entering the Ajanta caves inside my throat. So it's like finding a whole new world of connecting through stories, through myth, through rhythms, and there are various ways of entering the same art form. But one thing that combines all dances, I think, is just your connection of your foot with the ground. If you think of the essence, you're grounded. Your feet are constantly grounded. You're constantly finding that midline. Especially for a Kathak dancer, the midline, which we imagine connects the earth to the sky, flows through the body. And we have to find that space of breath. And every day that connection could be different. One day the image could be that of breath flowing inside an empty bamboo. Another day it could be an image of a tree which is rooted on the floor. Another day it could be an image of a waterfall. So how you connect every day with your body through your imagination and through a very active imagination is for me one of the most important features of the dance. I would also like to talk about two approaches to dance. I think I started off as a classical dancer where we were constantly asked to grasp the form with and forget about the body. Like it was about perfecting that rhythm. It was about disappearing into the tal. It was about becoming Shiva. It was about, uh, embodying Shakti and not really acknowledging कि हाँ हमारा shoulder ऐसे हो रहा है और हाथ ऐसे हो रहा है. That used to happen.
So you were talking about
Yes.
ways of looking at it, whereas in one we only focused on the form and not so much on the body to start with in the class.
Yes. Yeah, in the classical training, we were told to forget about the body and enter the form. And then I went to a contemporary dance school where it was all about the body, about the kinesphere, about the starting points and the ending points of the movement and anatomy. We actually had a subject called dance and anatomy where we discussed our adductors and we discussed our nervous system and we discussed each bone and muscle. And I think from there, I kind of changed my pedagogical approach to include some of this anatomical vocabulary. So, at a very young age, when children are talking about, Didi, my adductors are paining today, you suddenly get a vocabulary to talk about the body and you talk about, the bones and the muscles, very basic. Like you don't have to get into advanced structures, but just parts of the spine, like the cervical spine, the thoracic spine, the lumbar spine, and the sacrum. Then we do this whole roll down in teen tal, where the first 4 matras you're working the cervical spine, the second 4 matras the thoracic spine. So you're actually getting, familiarized with your body, because I think if a man needs to know a camera, a dancer needs to know the body inside out with its musculature and various things. So I think speaking anatomically about the body and in medical terms really helps a dancer in that sense. That's where I found also I take my mom's help a lot to really work out what things are called and just give my students a basic idea of how to look at, the clavicle and the shoulder blade and various things and see how that is working in different postures and how every posture needs to do different work to find a sense of alignment. You won't find two students who are the same. There'll be some who have a more natural alignment, and there'll be some, like I, for example, I don't think I was a natural dancer at all. I had to work extra hard to find the movement, to find my alignment, to really get a chakkar, So I think each dancer has to, in that sense, chart their own journeys. And the last thing I would say is just dealing with emotions as patterns of breath, really. Because what is every emotion? Every emotion is a breath pattern. Like you try being angry and deep breathing at the same time. You can't. You absolutely can't. So I think the study of acting and Navarasa Sadhana really cut every emotion down for me as patterns of breath. And I think if every human being were to learn that at a school level, about how emotions work, like when you're feeling frustrated, how a certain sense of alignment, if you place your body a certain way, you cannot be frustrated. It will definitely calm you down. So these are these little wisdoms that dance and abhinaya have within them that can really, I think, even at a non-dancer level, you might not even be a dancer, but they can really aid to make you relaxed, make you calm, and identify which music works for you and just play it. If the Geeta constantly, I've been very inspired. She plays chants in her house. Every room there's a different chant going on, and that kind of really brings together an atmosphere of the sense of a whole. I don't know whether I'm there. Am I there? Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. So yeah, that's what I wanted to end on. And that's from here you can enter empathy and compassion, like Sushmita ji was saying, because you from the individual to the collective. I think one of my most amazing experiences has been dancing as an ensemble and occupying stage space, and within that ensemble improvising with other bodies and other musicians in space has been also a very dynamic way of communicating with your fellow artists, which again reaches the spectator in terms of whatever experience they have of the rasa. Yeah, I think I'll end here.
Okay, so thank you, both of you and Beena, for actually setting the tone so wonderfully. Beena and I were thinking about, and one of the things that we used is something we read a long time ago on a piece on how the shamans, because we've been dealing with doctors and healings, and a piece that we read a while ago on, when anybody went to a shaman to ask or to talk about some complaint, some grievance, something that was not quite right with them, the shamans would say that track your illness down back to your personal history. They would ask questions like, when did you stop dancing? When did you stop singing? When did you stop telling stories? And they would sort of trace back your dis-ease with yourself to that. And that has left a huge impression on me. And I kept asking myself, my God, I have 2 left feet. I have so much inhibition. I can't sing to save my life. So what happens? And what do I do with stories? And I found my solace in saying I'm a teacher, and I hear stories and I tell stories, and maybe that's why I keep healing myself. Otherwise, if I were left to dance or music, I'd be finished. Never started. So, anyway, with that little understanding of the importance of dance and music to our sense of well-being. But of course, the question is that both of you are classical dancers. And, as Sanjukta said, the classical forms actually do tend to impose a certain structure on how we dance, what we dance, right? So what I wanted to ask both of you is that, we've been discussing in FEM 2020, the whole idea of the construction of a perfect body, a perfect normative body, which science does. It's, as Beena was saying, the parameters become indicators of this perfect body. And we've been kind of questioning it from disabilities perspective. We've been questioning it from various perspectives about what is this perfect normative body and how it is constructed. And I see that even in dance, we do have an idea of the ideal body, right? So very often when I see a lot of people who are spectators will say, oh, she dances well, but, she doesn't have a pleasing body presence. I find that really problematic. So I thought if you could both speak a little bit about the pressures of this normative ideal body in dance and how to free ourselves, and how do you do that in your practice? Sushmita Di? You have to unmute yourself. And I also just wanted to quickly add that this perfect body that is expected, what are the what are the regimes theoretically in the Shastras, in your practices? What are the regimes that are expected from this body to become that perfect body? You know, you have to take care of yourself. You have to take care that you don't, put on weight. You have to take care that you build muscle. You have to take care that you oil your hair in a particular way, don't cut your hair, etc., etc. So there is an entire regime around this creation of this perfect body, also the ideal dancer's body. So I just wanted your thoughts on that.
I think I will go back again to the principles of yoga and Natya Shastra. Because in yoga, Ashtanga yoga, as we know, the principles of Yam, Niyam, Pranayam, for me personally, takes care of most of this regime. Because Yam Niyam can be starting from Shoch, which is cleanliness and hygiene, going right up to Ishwar Pranidhan, which is just let go. Letting go is again a buzzword, let go, and we're all learning, and a lot of riyaz is also needed to practice let go.
Let go, yeah.
Dance and the daily riyaz, yoga, the pranayam, all of this teaches me to let go. Um, apart from this regime, there is my daily riyaz and something creating something new every day, no matter how small it is. Something to connect that I used to connect with my tiny 5-year-old, or something big for the next festival coming. Company of nurturing elements. Nature is the biggest one. People, books, music. All of this is nurturing that soul which dances and which connects with the rest in a performance experience. I also find massage very useful, and in releasing the tensions that creeps into my system as a part of the daily routine. And I believe that while working towards that, the ultimate requirements of a performer, which again goes back to the physical, emotional, mental, and physical, mental and spiritual, my body is taken care of automatically, because it is not about the size of my body, it is about how well it manages to express and impress or touch someone. For example, we all have seen people who are fat, and we notice it only after we come out or someone else tells us, oh, did you see how fat she was? And I think, no, I didn't actually, because what she was saying, what she was doing was so beautiful. It was like she was touching something deep inside me. I had no time to look at her physical form. It didn't matter. And on the other hand, we all have come across as very pretty, very shapely dancers. And at the end of that, you just come out with a impression of how pretty they were and not of what they were trying to say. So I feel I ought to have something strong that I want to say, and the medium to say it well. And of course, the things that that I and both Sanjukta said, very, very pertinent things about the way of looking at the body, about alignment, about the spine, about all the various joints in their proper place. All of that gets taken care of in the ideal daily riyaz of dance, yoga, and the rest of the life. So that's how I look at looking after the body.
And how challenging is that to communicate to the younger generation the importance of riyaz?
It is challenging. So many possibilities in their lives. They have so many things to do, and especially when they can only feel the result after they've actually done it. Till then, I think we didn't question. We just did it because Guruji was saying, "Ki karna hai to karo." But I like the challenge of explaining to my students कि क्यों करना है और करने से क्या होता है, नहीं करने से क्या होता है. So it's a different way of explaining and connecting. But then if we do not make it relevant to their daily lives, to our students now, then what is the point? How can it be part of their lives? It has to be that way. So yeah, it is a challenge. I enjoy it.
Thank you, Sushmita. Sanju, you want to, sorry, Sanjukta?
I think, Geeta, this brings me back to all the conversations we have had around the normative body and the beach pedagogy, especially because I have been deeply disturbed with just the idea of an ideal dancer. Just the idea of there being this, it actually comes from ballet, where you actually have, your physical measurements this is the vital statistics you need to have in order to become a ballet dancer. And I find that extremely problematic. I have been to contemporary dance school in London where I've seen dancers throwing up between classes because they were anorexic, and just this idea of, amazing dancers looking at me, who was like a novice at contemporary dance. I was probably the worst dancer in the school, but they should look at me saying, "Oh, you're so thin." And I used to wonder why they were so bothered about this bodily shape when they could dance so beautifully. So this idea of body and body shaming also been we very, very problematic in both Western and classical dance styles. But we have to kind of try and broaden the idea of what the body is, because especially during our teens, is actually a time when I find most of my students resisting riyaz and resisting entering the Kathak dancer's body. And I find the stories of resistance very, very important, almost as important as some stories of, equally important as stories of surrender and giving into riyaz, because they're probably resisting this idea of becoming the perfect dancer and negotiating themselves as imperfect. And I would like to say, as a professional dancer, that it's not easy, the path. You said, I feel so flummoxed as to what do I do with music and dance. I also feel, I'm a professional, but I feel, what do I do with this world of music and dance, which has these ideals, which the path sets before us. But it is really up to us to break and resist these ideals and form newer ways of inhabiting Kathak, newer ways of inhabiting traditions. We are also a tradition of Stri Vesham. If you look at Kuchipudi, when these men dress up as women and dance femininity with such grace, so you're not looking at that big man with a hairy paunch, but you're looking at this sensuous woman that's come onto stage. We are also a culture of Bin Baikansa Tamasha, where Lavani is danced by an all-male troupe. So we need to also expose our students to a larger idea of what dance is, and not just that pretty decked up dance on stage. We also need to introduce Chandralekha, who gave up the idea of ornamentation and dance altogether. And all these narratives of resistance, I think, need to become a part of classical dance pedagogy. It can't just stop at the Gharanedar narrative of the solo dancer representing a very nationalist idea of India. So this idea of resistance, and I have observed in my students, I've been exploring Thumri with them. And I've been exploring Thumri in this lockdown period specifically with 13 and 14-year-olds. And all of them have into it with their own thoughts and with their own questions of identity and sexuality, attraction, and who is Krishna, and is Krishna a god, or is Krishna a boy I'm attracted to. And I let them chart these journeys on their own and find languages in which they sometimes embrace the Thumri form and sometimes just resist it and don't within the space of the Thumri, but to find their own identity and their own negotiation of the erotic text and the character that they are playing, and their entry into their own bodies and their discomfort and questions with their bodies. So the narratives of discomfort need to come, I think, into classical dance. It cannot just be about this one-dimensional story, So the more narratives we have, and I really think that the dance as whole offers space for many different kinds of non-normative narratives, narratives of queerness. I've explored Fakir Nemana with Shah Hussain being in love with his disciple Madhulal, and just how that kind of erotic relationship can be portrayed, and where the Kathak allows me that. So there can be many experiments and broadening of the normative body. I think that there should be. There isn't enough that's being done for that. But I think we need different bodies dancing Kathak. Even the idea of inclusivity, like throwing it open to various forms. I've recently written an essay on Bollywood and Kathak. We constantly think of Bollywood and classical dance as a binary, but we share a history, and it's a history of great fun and a great humor, So we need to look at all these intersections and allow ourselves to find various ways of inhabiting the body. Sorry, I think I'm going on for too long.
No. In fact, I'm glad you raised those points, because that is exactly what I wanted to engage with further. That not only is there this ideal normative body, but this ideal normative body is the female body very often, right? So, and these ideal normative, like you rightly said, that the origins of Bharatanatyam actually, if you really see, will be traced back into Southern traditions, but the way Bharatanatyam was made the national dance, with the woman decorated singular as the central figure, has been challenged and questioned by people like Chandralekha and others. Point is that the female body gets decorative and is met or is made even in dance for the male gaze, like it is in the rest of society. And so I was wondering how you brought in the question of queer bodies, you brought it also the question of disabled bodies. We are recently beginning to see some efforts of bringing dance. I think it's Syed Pasha's group and all of them who are talking about dance and disability. How do you get Rumi to be danced on wheels, or how do you get, so the idea of making the body an important aspect without it being there for gaze, is something which is important. So I just wanted to ask you both also, this whole pressure on the female body and self to be this ideal Naika, the good Naika and all of that. How do you firstly understand it yourself, and then how do you talk to your students about it? And I don't know about Sushmita Di, but Sanjukta definitely has a few boys, has had the experience of training a couple of boys in the Kathak class also. So if you could just speak a little bit about this idea of the gendered body in terms of the Naika in dance, and how do you sort of negotiate today's pressures, Sushmita Di?
It's interesting. Yesterday, in a class of, I think there's 6 to 9 year olds in an online class, and one of the girls, she's asked me this question before, and she asked it again to me. Guruji, do boys do Kathak? And I answered her yes, and I told her that two of my gurus are men. But then I was going back on their training experience with me. What is it that they have learned in the class, or what is that they have seen to make them think of this, whether men dance Kathak or not? Is there, where is the gender in my everyday dance class? We talk about Krishna, we talk about Shiva. They are too young. We haven't started Radha yet with them. I haven't started. It's nature, it's rhythm, it's being together, choreography. So where do they get this question from? What is it? Is it so ingrained in our daily lives, in what they see in the social media, that men do not dance? Where does it come from? So yes, I have this question because I started learning with a male guru at the age of 8. So I never faced this question inside me. So I was quite intrigued by this question from a 7 year old. Going back to my perception of the two things here, I think there is gender and there is body, the form. And I think we can get very used to associating a gender with a form, which probably is required because initially, if we go back to watch the history of civilization, there probably was fluidity. Then we entered an era of rigidity where this is a woman's body, this is a man's area, and they're totally watertight with no connections. And now again, we are entering this age of fluidity. We are talking about all the trans woman, the bisexuals, the naturally woman's body, and all of that, and is becoming an accepted part of our social life. It's slowly becoming an accepted part of our social life. It kind of leads me to, when I think of Kelu Babu dancing to Kuru Yedunandana, in which Radha talks about the height of eroticism which Krishna takes her to. But it is danced by a man who, if you see him on the street, you probably would not look back twice at him. Whereas if someone, a pretty film actress comes, and you would probably want to keep looking back at her. But Kelu Babu can make me think that I'm looking at the most beautiful woman in the world, full of feminine, intricate feelings and all the alleyways of her emotions. So I feel that the journey is to go beyond gender and look at aspects. And that is what the Purusha and Prakriti, the dominant and the active, the kinetic and the potential, that is what it is about. So when I teach Paran, Sanjukta would understand, the Paran has to be danced in a masculine way, the Tandav aspect. But then again I hear, is it only men who dance Paran? No. So that is a very interesting part of the student's journey. In each of us, the Ardhanarishwar concept, the Shiva, is half male and half female. So in each of us, there is a feminine and the masculine. And the whole journey is to go to find the balance, both in me as a person and in the entire, on this earth, on this planet. When there is a lack of femininity, we associate Lasya with nurture, with care, with creation. So the earth, responds in a certain way. Then there is, maybe we can say there's more violence. And when there is a lack of masculinity, then we can associate with some things like lack of discipline, lack of focus. So I think it's time to look at gender and form as something separate, and also bring it into the daily education of our children, like Sanjukta said, right from the beginning. So that these watertight images of femininity as a pretty woman only can be broken.
Especially, yeah, and dance allows that possibility for us to explore those aspects of our body which otherwise you're not allowed to. Yeah. Maybe not the classical formal dance, but dance per se, movement per se, as Sanjukta always says. Sanjuk, you want to speak about your experiences of the gendered body, how, Lasya, Thunder, Naikas, come in whichever way you would like to.
I think for me, if dance is not empowering for the dancer and for the spectator, then there is no point of dance. Dance has to be a way of empowering, a way of owning your body, a way of owning your agency to create nuance and to create your own stories. And I actually feel very sad when it becomes this seen as this space of, often classical dance is seen as this space of exclusivity. हाँ वो तो classical है, वो तो हमारे बस का नहीं है. Even the way you were talking, dance and music is not for me. I'm a storyteller. But there are million different ways of entering these narratives. So we need to break this exclusive idea of dance, which is meant for a few elite. We really need to offer it as a language. I see dance as a language of empowerment, and it needs to be individualized in many different ways. At a school level, even at an advanced training level, there has to be many different avenues for a dancer. I think it's a myth that you have to be like a Kathak soloist who dances a margam and that's the end of your journey. That's the myth that people have, and most people do that arangetram and then stop dancing. It's almost like, that's actually the beginning where you start discovering your body, where you start really bringing that form, and then the question should be, where do you want to take the form? We did in fact, Geeta and I collaboratively did a project on the history of Kathak, and I remember one of the students asking, Didi, where does history end? And I said, it doesn't end. You're the one who's going to make history. Where do you want to take your Kathak? Speak it in your language. So there have been pedagogy is students asking their questions with the whatever knowledge of Kathak they have, and they've created pieces on identity with their own compositions and their own text and their own lyrics, and ask their questions which are seminal to them in Kathak. And I think that can be offered as a tool to various people, because the language, as even Shushmita Di said, is very, very deep. It's very, very researched. It is so beautifully aligning, but it just needs to be made accessible to more people, and more people need to use it as a tool for either healing or creating. And creating and healing are, like you said, are interchangeable, or telling stories or inhabiting rhythms, just being like holding the reins of time, is so empowering for a child. Just to say that I can ride this time in 2s, and now I'm doing it in 3s, and now I'm doing it in 4s. There is a sense of fulfillment and happiness that comes through that, you know. So there are many students of mine, including your daughter, who continue doing the footwork kariyas, even though they're not dancing the whole thing. That footwork kariyas goes on because it's that impression of creating in time and space and embodying abstractions, embodying, for some it will be embodying abstractions, for some it will be embodying numbers, for some it will be embodying emotions, but people need to have these outlets to create, even though they don't become so-called professional dancers, you know. But for many people in the Kathak world, possibly I wouldn't be a professional dancer because I don't do 1 hour repertoire performances of Kathak, but I approach it in a very different way. And I think there needs to be more ways of inhabiting the form, not just Kathak, all.
I think I'd like you to share quickly on your experiences and what I've heard you speak about the perfect good Naika and how you challenge that or question that.
There have been several ways that have challenged the good woman, because people associate the classical dancer with the good sanskari woman who has, you know, who wears her bindis and has her pallu in place and all these things. But one also must bear in mind that, you know, we are dancing the dance of the wife, and I proudly say, you know, like these women who defied norms and were earning, who supported so many music and dance fraternities, these families of women who have been erased from Kathak history. So I take great pride in dancing the dance of the Tawaif. I actually found
And also
in a poem by Ntozake Shange, an African-American poet that I interpreted years ago, who I placed in Banaras. Yeah. And I danced her in Kathak to the Sarangi. So there was this character from her poem called For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough. And she was extremely sensuous, celebrating her own sexuality kind of a woman. And when I read the poem, I saw that character dancing in Banaras, and I presented her in Kathak. And that led me to many different ways of inhabiting even a Radha or a Meera or, you know, mythological.
or the bhakti poets that you've done. Also.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
There's one thing I would like to revisit before we close. A question that Geeta put earlier about facing the challenges of Riyaz students. If I may, divert a little bit, rewind a little bit.
No, not at all. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Is one of the points of resistance, as Sanjukta mentioned. I am very much aware that the students who come here to classes in Gurgaon, a lot of them are from academically successful families. So studying and figuring out things, understanding the concept is very important versus doing and being. So I think the Kathak Riyaz, the Kathak regime, the Kathak class constantly prods them to do and to be rather than only to understand. Understanding, I always say that you understand the bandesh, you understand a composition, that is the beginning of dance. Of course, you have to understand your tukra, you have to memorize the balls, you have to know where it starts from the sum and which beat it. But then when you actually get up and do it, that's when the dance begins, because you do not take your notebook on stage, you take your body on stage. So this is something children sometimes find a little bit challenging, especially nowadays, spending 6 to 8 hours in front of the screen. just getting concepts and storing them in their brain. So getting them to motivate another part of the brain, which is to deal with doing and being and experiencing. That is the challenge, and I think that is really, really required today. So as Sanjukta said, it has to start very early on in schools, in the entire education system. Sports, yes, sports is accepted, but dance, not yet. Dance has to be part of the daily curriculum, because that's one of the best activities in which the body, mind, the spirit is coming together. So just to go back on that.
Yes, I think so. Thank you. Yeah.
The Tawaf and the Naika question, it made me sit up. For a few years, I was the director of Kathak Kendra, the institution where I graduated from. I directed it for a few years. And this was the annual exam where all the senior students have to do a performance test, and in front of all the gurus and star performers. And so I started this thing about that you also have to present a little, like a thesis, like a paper. So one of them was presenting something about the Tawaif tradition. And what she said to me, what she said to the audience struck me like a thunderbolt at that time, because she said, पहले तो ये भक्ति काल में मंदिर में था और उसके वक्त कथक बुरे वक्त से गुजरा जब ये तवायफों के कोठों में चला गया. And I just sat up and I said, well, define bura waqt. What is bura waqt? Because that is the time when women, a few women, who took the stand of making Kathak or making dance, making music their profession, and also, and it was quite established that it is difficult to hold to this profession of being a homemaker and that profession of being a singer or a musician or a poet and say what you have to say. So a few women took a very bold step at a time when the entire society was against them. And what Mirabai has said today is we still sing her songs. What Begum Akhtar has sung, what Kishori ji has sung, we still remember them. So I think it is very important for us not to forget those strides, those bold strides, and think of femininity as something which is the usual, I don't know, home.
Very, very usual, very middle class, upper class, sanitized woman. Yeah, whereas, thank you, Sushmita. That was lovely. I think we'll close with a few closing comments from the two of you, but our idea, as Beena said in the beginning, I was trying to articulate also, is to understand how the female body or the woman's body actually gets medicalized in science and is governed by this notion of the ideal woman body, and dance is also doing that to some extent. But what we are trying to probably come to it, to my mind, it looks like, is to see how both the systems, the canonical medical system or the canonical dance, classical dance system, can be opened up to each other, but also can be opened up to understanding the subjectivity of women's bodies and their lived experiences, and how to bring them in the clinic and how to bring them in the dance class also. Perhaps that is the kind of dialogue that we can build as we go along. But so a few closing comments from both of you. Whoever would like to go first? Sushmita Di.
I'm just very happy to be part of this dialogue, because I think inclusiveness and a broadening of horizons and breaking of compartments is what we need today, what the society needs today, what the world needs today. And I think this dialogue, this conversation is a part of that.
Yeah.
Time will decide it's how big or how small part it is, but it definitely is a part. So I'm very happy to be part of it. Thank you.
Yes, I also agree, and I think health, the body, and the questions of culture are so intrinsically lit, that, you know, we have to start seeing them as a whole, you know, and we need to, like, every field can benefit with conversing with the other. I would love to converse more with, you know, say, doctors as well as sociologists, anthropologists. I think this, like Sushmita Di rightly said, this cross dialogue is the way forward to really broaden the arts as well as the sciences. And the breaking of binaries is really the way forward. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
It was really lovely to spend the afternoon.